Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We'll call our Affairs and Agencies Committee meeting to order. First on the agenda is approval of the agenda, and we're short a couple of members this morning, so our chair, Steve Shotwell, will be filling in with voting. Motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Public comment. Public, you have 5 minutes to address the board. Feel free. Hello, public. One public shaking his head no. Okay, no public comment. Moving up. Good morning. Just state your name for us, please.
I'm Charity Steer, and I'm the, probably the only applicant for the to be reappointed to the Jackson County Farmland Preservation Program. I've been on that committee for some time. We've been largely inactive for the past few years. The Jackson County established a farmland preservation ordinance a number of years ago, and the committee established criteria for farmers to apply to the program and an application form which was approved by the Michigan State Farmland Preservation Program in anticipation of funding being available through the recapture of PA 116 funds. That recapture occurred, but there were so many new applicants that for that program that it used up the funds, so that there weren't any state funds available. So the program was, and then the economy tanked, and farmers were much more apprehensive about making any permanent decisions about their land. However, the new federal program, Farm Bill, does have funding available for farmland preservation, and farmers are becoming somewhat more confident about the value and management of their assets and land assets. And we have had people express some interest in protecting their land permanently. And as a result, the Legacy Land Conservancy, and I serve on their board, and Dahlem Center are in the process of reestablishing some avenues for farmers to permanently protect their land. We anticipate that it's going to be somewhat difficult to get the first project done in Jackson County, because it's always, the first project is always difficult, because with no protected land you get extra points for adjacency, and with no farms currently protected in Jackson County, it's going to be difficult. So it probably is going to take a year or two to get a project approved through the federal program, but we think we can do it. And after all the work we did to get the ordinance passed and the application done and the criteria approved, I would really like to be able to participate in getting the project actually through the federal program. And I hope you'll accept you'll reappoint me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to committee items. Note, if you have a printed agenda, we've switched items H and items K. It is accurately reflected on the electronic agenda. First up on the committee items are the minutes of the June 8th meeting. Looking for approval. Motion and support. Corrections or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Appointments. We have a number of appointments this morning. County Building Authority, Tony Seaman is the current member, but he still has not reapplied, it looks like.
Mr. Chair, I had the opportunity to speak with him, and he was not notified. He did not receive a notification that his application was due again, and he is interested in maintaining that position, so I would be willing to recommend him.
Okay, that would be nomination from the floor then. And are there any other nominations? And Julie, if you can check back with him, ask him to fill out an application again before the meeting next week. Okay.
Yes, and also to inform Delane, yes.
Okay. All those in favor of forwarding Tony Saman to the full board? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Farmland Preservation Committee, a number of appointments, 4 seats open, 2 applications. Charity Steer is a current public member. We just heard from her, and she is an applicant.
I'll make the motion to move that to the full board.
Motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Elected official is open with Andy Grimes. Public member William Porath is a current member that appears to not have reapplied. And we have 1 commissioner member, Sarah Leitner, serving and has reapplied. We'd be looking to forward her on.
Support.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Her name will be forwarded on as well. Solid Waste Planning Committee, it's a indefinite term from the waste industry representative. Charles Dunnigan is the current member, and David Dunnigan is the only applicant.
Move to concur with Dave Dunnigan, and I'd like to speak to why Charlie has left. If I could, he wanted this message carried to the board. He appreciated working with this committee, but he's taken a job in Washtenaw County and is no longer in the industry, and he felt it wasn't appropriate, although he stays a Jackson County resident.
Well, we appreciate his having served. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. The Jackson Traffic Safety Commission, I attended that meeting last week actually, and I see that it's an open seat of Paul Garcia. And I spoke with one of the members after the meeting. I think they were of the belief that they would appoint the members. I pointed out that the Board of Commissioners does that. They have a person in mind, I think, for one of the openings. So I suggested they get with the administrator's office, so I'm assuming we'll have follow-up from them probably very soon before our next meeting. And that concludes the appointments. Next up is the equalization report, semi-annual. Good morning.
Do we have any questions on the report today?
Do on page, take me a second to get there. Looks like it's page 6. Why the large jump on Mackey and TAC? I think it was those 2.
Actually, we had new construction go on there, so that went on as new this year.
And it actually was enough at Mackey to double it from 14 to 15? Almost double?
I don't know, to be honest with you, I did not put this report together.
It seemed like a huge jump to me with that one in particular.
I'd have to look into that further.
Okay, if you can just follow up with information on that. I guess I'd be surprised if they doubled their size or doubled the equipment they brought in. But any other questions or any other highlights you want to give us?
Not that I can think of at this point.
Okay. Julie, anything from you? Chair Shotwell? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is a Friend of the Court quarterly report. Sarah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
To start out, I generally talk about our goals and objectives. We are meeting 3 of our primary goals that we set for this year at the 6-month mark. Our support reviews are all within 60 days. Our parenting time complaints are all being processed within 5 business days, and all of our appointments with our casework and accounting staff are available within 2 business days. So we're really happy that we've accomplished those goals. There have been a handful of support reviews that may extend that, but generally that's related to obtaining specific information. So if somebody owns a business and there's a question regarding their income, things like that, and we need to have an independent accountant come in and look at the finances to assess income, those might be delayed. But generally speaking, the support reviews are all within 60 days. So that was a tremendous accomplishment. I included some statistics for you to look at. Of note, the appointment numbers that we've had have jumped from January to May, from 26 jumping up to 72 and 67. That is a good thing in that our clients are able to access our caseworkers more and be able to have those appointments, so the numbers are increasing, but it's a little unsettling yet for our caseworkers to see those numbers jump. So I'm looking forward to the next 6 months to see if those don't taper back down or if that's going to be a working number or if they continue to rise, to see what we're looking at as far as the volume goes. It's still manageable, but it's something that's significantly changed over the course of the last 6 months. And over the last year or few years, those numbers have been steady at the 26, 27 mark. So I don't know if clients at the time were looking at, oh, this appointment's going to take 2 weeks for me to get, forget it, I'll just, send a letter or do something like that, or if now they're realizing they can access their caseworkers, so they are asking for those appointments. So.
Hi, Julie.
Thank you. Sarah, could you give us an example of what one of the more popular topics or concerns people have and are scheduling appointments for?
I think generally speaking, we have people that have parenting time complaints, so that would be something that they'd want an appointment for if they're perhaps being denied access to their children, or maybe the non-custodial parent isn't returning the child on time. Typically, our enforcement appointments are more related to problems with their accounts. So perhaps a payer is calling in and saying, you know what, I just can't afford this support, it's too high, my income withholding order is too high, or I just lost my job and I'm not sure what to do, and how do I handle all this? We get people that maybe are facing relocation, and so they don't know what they can do. They have to leave the state, but they have their children here, and a court order that says you can't leave the state. So those are our typical appointments that we have.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Our works in progress are the order to show cause enforcement protocols. We're looking at tweaking and improving those processes. We have two spectrums that we work with, our willingness to pay spectrum and our ability to pay spectrum. So we have people that maybe are very willing to pay but don't have the ability to pay, versus people who may be very unwilling to pay their child support and have the ability to pay. So we want to make sure that our enforcement is tailored to the right people. We don't want to go after people that don't have the ability to pay child support. We want to work with those people, especially when they're willing to pay but don't have the means to try to get them in programs and work with them so that they are able to pay their child support, and really focus our enforcement on the people that have the means but are actively trying to avoid supporting their children. So that's the direction that we're headed with our enforcement protocol. We recently hired a new center manager for the Family Visitation Center downstairs. They handle our supervised parenting time and supervised parenting time exchanges. We're happy to have her. Her name is Alyssa Dewar. We also hosted an immersion training, and we'll also be co-hosting a training for the state later on this month, and that'll be held up in Traverse City, but we're really excited for those training opportunities. Through the first immersion training, they opened up our opportunities for some new parenting plans that we typically had not utilized with the program. So it was more 1 hour, once a week, that type of thing, and we're looking at expanding those options and doing off-site, but still allowing the supervision. So we're excited about that. The last project that I have is our bench warrant amnesty program. We have a bachelor's level intern that we are working with, and she started the program up again. We ran it in 2011 and sent out 515 amnesty letters and collected over $17,000 in bench warrant child support. We dismissed a total of 58 warrants. And what that is we send a letter out to a person, and this was typically focused on out-of-state warrants. So these are people that we aren't necessarily going to go to Texas and go get and fly back and incur those costs, but send a letter to them saying, hey, you've got this warrant, let's get it out of the way, pay 1 month's worth of support or the equivalents, and we'll dismiss it and we'll get you back on track. Because I think a lot of people, they get that warrant and then they just hide and they don't know how to get themselves out from underneath it. And it's not the end of the world. We can get it on track and get their case on track. So it's a very useful program. We just started it, so I don't have any information as far as how it's going yet, but we're excited to see that improves our bench warrant collections. So any questions?
Sarah, just one question. I probably don't have the number for it, but out of curiosity on those out-of-state and in-state letters that were sent out, is that all the bench warrants that were out there, or were there a lot more than that and these were just a select few?
These were a select few. We tried to cater to some of the older warrants. We were doing a lot of locate efforts, so these were good addresses. We've been in contact with them before, but never came together on getting those warrants resolved. So it was a very select few.
Very good. Commissioners, any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the Region 2 Planning Biannual Report. Very lengthy, detailed printed report. 28 pages, I think, right, Grant?
Good morning. Yes, something like that. Because of that report, I'm just going to highlight a few things on ongoing activities. Region 2 staff has continued the management of the JAX program, the Jackson Traffic Safety Commission, and the Jackson County Planning Commission, of which one of the attachments that you received was the annual report for 2014. Under special projects, we've been very busy the first 6 months of this year with finalizing and disseminating the asset management report for the 3-county region, including Jackson County, management of the JAX Transportation Improvement Program, behind-the-scenes work on the solid waste management plan. We helped the city and the county put together a very successful joint recreation plan and a subsequent application for the Sparks Park Intercity Trail connector through the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund application process, and also the work that Steve Duke has done on the behalf of the region in cooperating with our 3 SEMCOG county neighbors to the east on the Regional Prosperity Initiative. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Grant, appreciate the great detail in the report. Made for interesting reading. Julie, any questions? Chair Shotwell. Grant, thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff Department biannual report with Under Sheriff Cool, who disappeared temporarily.
Yes. Good morning. We'll run through this and provide you some statistics from the mid-year, January 1st through now, and obviously take any questions that you may have. A lot of it's somewhat of the same format that we have, and we'll update you on things that are going on within the Sheriff's Office. So average daily population intake continues to be fairly steady. Average daily population is holding a little bit down slightly. Again, some of the services that we have to provide or we provide to the inmates, the doctor's calls, nurses' calls, and mental health is always a high one as our population is highly in need of those services. Continuing to board inmates for Department of Corrections. Again, this provides a positive impact on the general fund and all through the various types of inmates that we house, whether it be the parole violators or boarders or technical rule violators or what's commonly referred to as straddle cell inmates. This continues to provide nearly $1.2 million just in revenue in the county jail's budget back to the general fund. Again, some of the activity from the correction side, almost 250 cells searched, 61 inmates were provided some type of intervention when they're having a mental health crisis, a couple assaults on staff, a number of misconducts and disruptive incidents. Work is underway, and actually this is being finalized. I would expect to see this start in the fall semester. We have changed out a number of our MDOC boarders for individuals that the Department of Corrections wants to try on a, I guess, a pilot program, and they're going to start taking college courses, basic core college courses through Jackson Community College at the jail. They reached out to us. We've been working on this for several months. The funding is set through both the college and various sources in the Department of Corrections. We are simply housing them and providing the facilities to host these basic classes. Obviously, the hope is these individuals are on the tail end of their terms, low-level offenders that are being housed with us. we are hoping that they're going to be released and will continue their education and avert any recidivism back into the criminal justice system. Again, this is kind of a mirror of the program we've had through Jackson Public Schools. We've got 11 high school diplomas awarded through our program so far, and we also have a GED program. The difference is the high school diploma is an actual diploma from Jackson Public Schools. They participate in that program, and there's very strict criteria within that program. They have to have the credits that are would put them on to the path of completion, and they would have to have a certain age range where they can be eligible for this diploma. But it's worked very well. We've had a number of graduates, and seems to be a very high-value program. Again, the inmate workers take care of the jails, both Wesley Street and Chandler Road, and a number of things done inside and within the immediate facility. We were also contacted by the state of Michigan back in 2014, and they wanted to have us test a pilot program doing online training for corrections deputies. Now that the correctional setting is going to similar track as to MCOLS or more professionalized, there are certain benchmarks, training requirements, etc. that need to be made. We were asked to participate in this. We have implemented this program. It seems to work very well for the correctional deputies. We're continuing to use and move forward with Medicaid with the Department of Human Services to offset medical costs to the county for our inmates. There are obviously a number of complications in that, but we think we may have a plan now that's working. The problem with that is medical billings can be anywhere from 6 to 10 months behind, so it really takes a very long-term frame to see what the actual savings are. But there can be some complications with that. If the inmate is receiving any type of alternate funding or aid, the Medicaid is shut off and it cannot always turn back on. On the positive side of that, we are seeing a lot of more inmates showing up with some form of Medicaid or coverage. When they come to jail, that does get shut off, so we do have to take steps and measures to turn that back on. But it appears to be moving in a positive fashion. We did some parking lot repairs at Chandler Road, a number of asphalt issues that were sinking, especially around the catch basins. We worked with facilities on that and have gotten that successfully repaired. The body cameras in corrections have been very much aid for us. The use of force reports are down. Inmates tend to act differently when they know they're being recorded. It's been a huge win for us as far as recording the events from our perspective and actual documentation of those events. Road Patrol, just under 14,000 calls for service that we responded to. Just under 1,000 concealed pistol applications investigated, and 2,400 pistol purchase permits were issued, and a little over 1,100 FOIA requests were filled just in this first half of the year. And those are mostly crash reports, incident reports, things of that nature. 807 arrests, 133 OWIs, a number of misdemeanor and civil infraction citations. Some of the major cases responded to the Amtrak train crash where it appears an intoxicated individual in the village of Grass Lake intentionally placed himself on the rail line, and he suffered obviously fatal injuries from that crash. We responded to a traffic crash up on Wilcox Road in Tompkins Township near Onondaga. It was initially reported as a traffic crash, but when deputies arrived, they ID'd the man as having a cardiac event. We did deploy one of the AED defibrillators that American One had provided us about 1.5 years ago. He was not in a shockable rhythm, so they continued CPR on him until he was taken to the hospital. He was transported by JCA to Allegiance and was in serious condition, but was recovering at that time. We responded to help the city of Jackson in the area of Francis Street and Rockwell earlier this year. They asked us to be on the lookout for an armed subject that was fleeing the area where shots were fired. One of our deputies located the suspect walking down the street and did recover a loaded handgun. He was taken to the youth center and lodged for those offenses. As far as the traffic crash team goes, we did respond to an incident on Luttonton Road in Pulaski Township for a child on a agricultural operation who had suffered injuries when a load of grain shifted on a wagon. He did suffer fatal injuries from that incident. We investigated that. Back in the earlier part of this year, we responded up into North Deering Road in Sandstone Township for a home invasion. Homeowner contacted 911. An intoxicated individual was knocking on his front door and eventually pushed his way into the residence. The homeowner left the residence, called 911. We were able to find him within the residence, hiding in a closet. We obviously arrested him for the burglary. Blackman Township assisted us on that one. Pheasant Run, we responded for armed home invasion. 2 subjects had robbed an individual. We determined they were acquaintances of the individual. After working on this for most of the night, we were able to identify the individuals and take them into custody. A number of ammunition, handguns, and a rifle were recovered in that incident. The Comerica Bank robbery, Comerica was very helpful in getting us very high-quality digital images right away after this robbery. After putting the pictures of the individual out on Facebook and Crime Stoppers, he was taken into custody about 16-20 hours later. That Facebook post had reached something like 56,000 people. It was a great avenue for us, and we had a lot of tips flow in. Obviously, everybody knew who this guy was. This gentleman has since turned himself in midweek last week, responded for a report of a carjacking on Horton and Vroman Road. The original vehicle that the subject had taken was crashed shortly down the road, and when a good citizen slowed down and tried to help him because they thought they were aiding in a traffic crash, she was robbed of her vehicle as well. However, she was a little quicker than he was because she was able to activate the OnStar tracking for the vehicle, which we were able to recover the vehicle a short time later. He was not in it, but we were able to identify the driver, who we believe is responsible for this, and he was turned in last week. Again, on North Meridian Road, a head-on traffic crash near East Berry Road. Individual crossed the center line and struck another vehicle. There were some serious injuries to that one, but everyone is recovering from that crash. And again, the crash team responded to Pulaski Township for an all-terrain vehicle accident. ATV had left the roadway, and the driver, a 16-year-old male, he succumbed to his injuries in that crash. Rives Township, again, the major crash team responded for a serious injury, personal injury accident. An individual had run the stop sign on the east-west road and struck a vehicle that was northbound. I'm happy to say that the most seriously injured individual who is not at fault is recovering. I've spoke with his family as recently as last week, and he's doing very well. Fatal motorcycle accident on North Deering Road near Springport Road in Sandstone Township. Gentleman driving a Honda Goldwing. Deer ran in front of him. He was not wearing a helmet and did suffer fatal injuries from that. Mr. Cannon was a business proprietor here in Jackson, and he suffered his fatal injuries from that crash. A fatal injury accident out on Interstate 94. Vehicle occupied with several individuals left the roadway in the snow and ice, overturned. A 94-year-old man who was in the vehicle did suffer fatal injuries from that. And again, the crash team assisted and reconstructed that scene. A number of major crimes that we participated in that kind of crossed a number of jurisdictional boundaries. A number of receiving and concealing stolen property cases linked back to a select few individuals where most of this property is being taken from home invasions. We've worked with a number of other agencies, and 2 subjects were identified in this, and they have charges pending. You probably heard something about this, as I think it was kind of mentioned in one of our previous reports, but there's been a large-scale student loan fraud case identity that appeared to be centered in Jackson, stealing the identities of a number of people in Jackson and Hillsdale County. We've been working with a number of federal agencies and a number of sheriff's offices and the state police to bring a resolution to this. The FBI was very helpful in this, and we executed a number of search warrants here in Jackson several months ago and have identified what we believe to be the key perpetrators in this. They were essentially stealing individuals' identities from a number of resources and then opening up student loans under those people's names and then collecting the money and simply doing what they want with those loans. Again, as the winter rolled into the early part of 2015, as expected because of the snow and the extreme temperatures, we had a number of responses out to the freeway or freeway-type roadways, assisting either the state police or other agencies, freeway closures and things of that nature. Let's hope for a less worse winter here. JNet, number of investigations, arrests, guns seized, search warrants. A couple of major cases from them in 2015, large-scale crack cocaine dealer. They seized almost 1,000 grams of powder cocaine and crack cocaine mixture. In March and June, both respectively, a number of search warrants that seized 5 grams of heroin and 12 grams of heroin, respectively. Although the amounts may seem low, heroin is a very low-dose drug. One bindle is very minute that can get somebody high. So the quantities are often very low in that. But heroin continues to be the biggest attractor and the biggest focus of our resources. A number of the reserves and mounted hours and other volunteers, they contributed to significant events and will continue to do that, like the fair, fireworks, the traffic jamming, the boat races in Grass Lake, and then we have Dick, who helps in the front office by filing a number of paperwork type issues, logging gun permits, and helping at the front window. These volunteers are very helpful to us. As a matter of fact, we're going to run a reserve academy towards the end of the year in hope of getting some new reserves in there to maybe help out a little bit more or increase those staffing at some of those events. Homeland Security, we were allocated $131,000, and this is the Homeland Security Grant Program, not the funding resource for the operations of the office. Some of these things you had probably heard about, or we had mentioned before, the Petzl Escape System for the Fire Service, the Knox Box program, the ICS 300 and 400 classes, and the Jackson County Hazmat training. Some of these are repetitive, having been listed in some previous reports because they were paid for under the fiscal year 2013 for Homeland Security, but they were being completed under our 2014-15 fiscal year. Some of the new systems were the remaining of the Petzl Escape System. And what a Petzl Escape System is essentially a harness and rope connections that allow firefighters to essentially bail out of a window should the situation become compromising within that structure where they're fighting the fire. They wear it into this fire and it allows them to repel or to escape out the window should that be needed or they can't gain access back to the lower floor. This was a project that the Jackson County Fire Service put together and presented to the local planning team, which was approved some time ago, and now it is in the process of being completed. Some of the projects we're looking at coming up, mass notification systems, and of course radio projects are always being reviewed. Those projects are under review and will probably be sometime in some future programs should funding and allocation be there. Some of the training and activities that OEM has participated in, of course, Skywarn training, which we conduct yearly. That was held again at the Chandler Road Correctional Facility in the training room. We participated in a statewide tornado drill in April. A number of businesses and schools and county departments took part in that drill as well. The emergency management, both at the federal and state level, have really been pushing for involvement in long-term care facilities, so we've been heavily involved in that, in creating plans for them. We updated a lot of their plans, reviewed their plans, did hazard and vulnerability assessments at a number of the long-term care facilities, and we've worked very closely with the staff to ensure the plans meet the state requirements and guidelines. All of the off-site hazmat plans were updated again and checked in compliance. 2 new plans were created. Again, MySIMS and WebEOC training was held at the health department to get any new users or new department heads or county employees involved that may need that. We participated in a full-scale exercise at Springport Schools in May. We've been getting more heavily involved in the Volunteers Active in Disasters database and possible access to that core of volunteers in the times of disasters. I think it's a good thing. A lot of these people are kind of like reserves in the sense they come from some type of background or training in either search and rescue or some type of disaster response or preparedness, and now they're volunteering their time to be used as kind of a core volunteer should a community experience some type of disaster. And some of the things they might do is they might take over basic traffic control functions if like there's a mass power outage and the actual police officers need to go out and do life safety type of work, things like that. So they relieve a lot of the resources that could be used elsewhere, and we're getting heavily involved in that. Full-scale communicable disease exercise in March. We worked in conjunction with Allegiance Health, 911, the health department, and JCA to plan, design, and then look at that full-scale exercise in the after-action stages. Again, as we talked about earlier, ICS 3 and 400 classes to get some of the people up to training that either needed it or had not had it. We did respond out to the storm that we had recently and did damage assessments, documented local damages specifically to the 2 heavily damaged structures up in Henrietta Township and Rives Township respectively. And of course we participated in the exercise at the medical care facility, full-scale emergency planning exercise. Dispatch, real quick, these are just the calls for service for the various agencies, and I'll give the footnote again. These are coming through 911 system. A lot of agencies do things differently and may enter calls from their headquarters of their own system, so we are not asserting that this is this respective jurisdiction's calls. We're just saying this is what came through central dispatch for the purposes of 911. Total calls for fire service, and then total phone calls received by 911, and anywhere roughly between 10 and 15,000 is what we receive monthly. Obviously, when you have events or weather, those tend to spike a little bit. Some of the highlights of 911, we worked very diligently, our operators did, to find 2 elderly citizens as they were reported to us missing. They were found a day later in Fairfax, Virginia, and the Fairfax authorities have provided significant help to us in locating them. Suicidal female, again, through the use of cell phone location technology, was located as she was calling dispatch and was despondent, wanting to end her life. She was safely located by the city police in Loomis Park. We assisted Ingham County with capturing a subject who was on a bus headed to Jackson. And then we're continuing to work with and analyze the ESI net system to have positive impacts on all the PSAPs around us and including us. And as that program continues on, we will surely update you. And that is all I have.
Undersheriff, I appreciate you trying to send it last night. It came in this morning, but won't load on mine. You worked on it through the weekend, so, but I'm sure we can get it so that it's with the report so other commissioners can see
Absolutely, I will get that to Delaney right away.
Questions from commissioners? Julie?
Yeah, I have a few. First of all, Commissioner Leitner coincidentally asked me over the weekend this question. She's currently in some training, and I believe one of the workshops led her to ask this question to me, so I will just direct it to you. Do you know if we are responsible for paying the Medicaid match for people in our jails, is the first part, and the second part is, do we receive grants for that?
We do not receive any grants for any type of Medicaid work that we do. We are not responsible for making the match. Medicaid is a system that stands on its own because we are not accessing any benefits through Medicaid. We are simply saying, we are now responsible for this individual, and this individual either did have Medicaid before he came to us, or this individual is eligible for Medicaid. Having said that, the process for enrolling them can be quite steep, but I think we've got it down to a process now. I'm not aware of any grants out there. The only thing that we receive is that when somebody comes to jail, we report that to the Social Security Administration. And if they are receiving some type of SSI benefits, SSI stops that and awards us a stipend every month. However, it's not the full SSI benefit. They award us a stipend for notifying the Social Security Administration this individual is now in custody and shouldn't be receiving his benefits because we're taking care of them. And that is a revenue line in the county jail budget.
All right, thank you. Second of all, I would like to offer insight on the missing persons component you reported on. One of the family members of one of the elderly people that were missing for a significant amount of time just asked me to share with your department how absolutely pleased they were with the representation of the deputy that was assigned to their family. He was compassionate, he was professional, he was thorough, he made follow-up calls afterwards, and she just asked me to pass that on. In addition to, I think she's going to share her gratitude as well with you, but just kudos on that one.
Thank you for those kind words.
Yes. In regard to the educational success stories you shared, the 16 diplomas and the 11 GEDs, how do those numbers compare to prior years?
Well, the program is still relatively new. The GEDs are increased slightly. There appears to be a better interest amongst the population, but the high school diplomas are really only in their second year, and we saw 4 the first year, and now we have 11. So there is a significant increase. it does allow us to carry on someone's education. We had one individual who, he had to go back to school, and JPS provided the setting to do that within the jail for about a year and a half to get caught up before he could even enter into this program.
Sure.
And he did it. He was dedicated to it. So it does provide them an incentive, but as I talked earlier about the Department of Correction borders and the college programs, it provides for a more well-behaved inmate, because one of the hammers that we have within that program is if you don't follow the rules in the facility, we are going to send you back downtown, which removes you from this program, or you are not going to be allowed to participate in this program. So it does provide a lot of, I guess what I'd call intangible benefits.
Sure. And my last question, the CPL applications, you mentioned the investigations that you're doing, that will come to an end at the end of this year, is that correct?
That's correct. The state police will pick all that up, and essentially what we do is when we receive a CPL applicant, we look through our databases, what contacts we've had, if those contacts are significant, if they involve violence, weapons, things like that. The irony in this is that the state police are still going to have to come to us and have us look in our system. So though we're not responsible for it, we're still going to have a part in it, because they're going to have to get into our record system. The way that it used to go is that, we would receive this application and the various agencies would do the research if there's any context. Now, the state police are just exclusively taking this and taking this, I guess, investigation aspect on. Captain Bizarre did it as part of his duties, and really it was just a simple lookup in the system, what contacts do we have, and then the board would go back and discuss, well, we had these contacts, is it appropriate to issue this person a CPL, or maybe from the court side, what was the adjudication of this incident the individual was involved in. So really we were just kind of tendering them records, but the irony is they're still going to have to come to us.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out then in 2016, and to what extent they are adhering to your recommendations and the information you're sharing then, won't it be? Thank you.
Chairman Shotwell, any questions? No, sir. Thank you, Undersheriff.
Thank you.
Next up is the District Court Quarterly Report. Tammy Bates. There's a link to the monthly reports of hers on her spot on the agenda. Tammy, if you want to hit the highlights or however you want to do it.
Bring this back up so the screens aren't blank there.
Thank you. First, what I want to do is thank you for allowing me to come this month. I'm scheduled usually for August, but I'm going to be on vacation, so appreciate the opportunity to come now. I guess what I'll do is just highlight, like I normally do, in reference to our caseloads and collections. Caseloads are staying pretty steady as from where they were last year. We're up a little bit, not much. Our collections is up about 88,000 from where we were at this time last year. Everything else is pretty status quo from where we have been. Nothing alarming there. And our reorganization that took place in January is going well. We've got everyone moved, and I think the kinks are worked out as far as who's going where, and getting everyone acclimated to the criminal department being down on the first floor as opposed to the second floor, and getting the officers acclimated to that as well. We only have construction left to do, and that'll happen after everything else is done with the county clerk's office and things of that nature. But for the most part, everything is going fine at this point. So I'll answer any questions you have.
Commissioners, any questions of Tammy for District Court? Steve?
A comment. I've had people come and speak to me about the quality of your employees and how nice they've been treating people. I want you to take it back that they are appreciated in the community. And they've handled some elderly situations very, very well. And that's been shared with me, and they wanted me to let you guys know that you're doing a wonderful job over there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Very good. Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you.
Next up is JC Radio Modernization and GPS System.
Good morning. This morning I have a couple of guests. Lieutenant Hammond is here from the Sheriff's Department. He's been involved in, we've been communicating with them throughout the process. And we have Brad Morgan from ROCOM, the vendor that was selected to provide the radio system. I do have some updates to share, and then I've also got just a brief statement just to remind us of the overarching goals of what set us on this path a little over 6 months ago. I've installed 3 such systems like this, and I can tell you that the impacts are significant when GPS systems are installed, and perhaps Brad can speak to that too from what he's seen from his other clients. In this era of diminishing money and resources for departments like ours, we are under increasing pressure to be both transparent and to operate more and more business-like, with efficiency and effectiveness being paramount. So with that in mind, tracking the rolling assets, our fleet, is extremely important. And you see a lot of business models having done this over the last decade. UPS, FedEx, and so forth all have such tracking devices. And other municipalities throughout the United States have implemented systems just like this. So a lot of the technology has been tried and true. You can get very, very nice systems that cost quite a bit of money on a monthly basis, on an annual basis. I know of road agencies like ours that spend upwards of 6 figures to track the location of their equipment. One of our goals was to not have that kind of a recurring cost. So we were looking at some of the newest and latest technology using radio systems. This real-time data, especially in storm events, is extremely important. Just a couple, 3 weeks ago here with our storm event, I'm sure Bob can attest to the fact he would love to have been able to pull up on an iPad where our loaders were, where our trucks were, where our fleet was, especially with diminishing resources again, and even with the condition of our fleet right now with certain items sometimes not operable. So this is very important. And I think in line with that, making smart decisions on the fly. Our foremen, we expect to have iPads. They're already equipped with them. This system will allow them to see wherever they're at with the data streaming. They can flip screens and see the weather, and then they can flip back and see what's going on with their fleet and make decisions. After the fact, I view it a lot like Monday morning quarterbacking, so to speak, where we sit down and we replay the events, and we can analyze how did we do? How can we do it better next time? This is true for our snowplow routes. This is true for our response to the storm event with trees down, etc. Even just routine maintenance items. So this is all very important as an operational tool for us to be more cost-effective in the future. Let's also be mindful that this is really just a phase 1 implementation. I think our goal is to come forward with a phase 2 sometime in the future, where we install sensors on the vehicles that will tell us whether blades are up or down, whether salters are on and off, whether mowers are on and off, even emergency strobes. You can set all kinds of settings in the system, and it'll send that data and track it and archive it. Even engine issues and codes can be sent, fuel efficiency, engine idle times, where we get alerts if an engine is idling for too long. We can talk to that operator and ask questions as to why we're wasting fuel. These are all pieces of a GPS system, but first you've got to have the building blocks. So this is like the foundational Lego blocks, and we plan to add, as we're getting new vehicles in the future, those sensors and get that data and information. So out of the 4 goals I wanted to highlight, number 3 is to have a robust system, but we wanted to minimize those recurring costs. Once we purchase this radio system, our recurring costs are extremely small. It's basically just maintenance and upkeep of the radios and the GPS software and hardware for the computer system. We literally have 2 radios sitting in the office that receive and send data and connect it to a computer. And all that information is logged and sent through the software. In the packet, you'll see some screenshots of the GPS system. We attach that to the item. And lastly, we are trying very hard to be proactive in many regards. I'm only 8 months into my new role, but one of the key goals and objectives that we have is to look ahead 5 to 10 years and implement and leverage our resources using the latest and most cost-effective technology available to us. GPS is just one of those tools that we need in our toolbox to remain competitive, transparent to our public. When we get customer complaints or claims that our plow driver was speeding or that they hit a mailbox or that they missed a spot, we can look it up. We can't do that today. We have to interview the driver ask what they remember, memories fade, information isn't reliable. We track every call, every service request coming in, but we don't have the back end to see if it actually got followed through on. This is that tool. So just by luck, we're happening, to get new radios with it because of the fact that we have the low recurring costs and the technology has developed and evolved over the last decade roughly, but particularly over the last year. And in fact, this purchase is some of the latest, greatest improvements that Motorola has made to the units. Now the radios can actually buffer more data and attach directly to these sensors on our phase 2 efforts. In the past, you had to buy an additional box to attach to the radios to buffer all that information and data. That was an additional $300 to $500 each. So the system we're purchasing is much enhanced from what was available when I last implemented 2 systems only 2 years ago. So the updates that I'd like to share real quick went out in a weekly report to Mike Overton on Friday. We had 4 big questions that were asked of us. One was the tower quantity question. What was the difference between the sheriff's proposed towers and ours? And I'll defer that to Brad to answer in a moment. Another big question, or not really a question, but an issue I wanted to highlight was our system would upgrade the microwave link between Stony Point and the tower building here. There have been issues with that. It's a very touchy, finicky, and I'd like Brad to address that as well. So it's a synergy with the Sheriff's Department and their system as it exists today and as it will be improved in the future. The third item is coordination with the Sheriff's Department has been ongoing, so I'd like Lieutenant Hammond to maybe say a comment about that. And the fourth item is that one of the features that I didn't bring up in the study session or highlight in my staff report was the remote access by smartphone, so that authorized individuals can literally be on the two-way radio system using their phone. They can log in, is my understanding, and Brad can highlight the features of that, but from anywhere in the world, as long as you've got internet to your phone, you can communicate with any of our drivers, any of our management team. So that's a very important feature, especially in the middle of emergency events and so forth. And the other big goal and objective overarching on this was the improved collaboration with Calhoun County. Right now today, Calhoun crews cannot talk to JDOT crews. We're sharing equipment back and forth. Bob, you can attest to the fact that we're severely handicapped when we're trying to chip seal and haul stone. The drivers aren't sure where to go. This is a chunk of money, a check we're writing, but I can assure you that there's spending money and then there's spending money / wasting money. And when our drivers are idling, trying to figure out where to go merely because they can't talk to the team and find out what's going on, we are idling engines, idle labor, standing by, and so forth. So from an operational effectiveness and efficiency standpoint, I feel very strongly that this radio system is the right thing to do for our county. So with that, I'd like to have Brad say a few words on these first 2 items, the tower quantity question and the microwave link upgrade. Then I'll have Lieutenant Hammond come up. And lastly, Brad, if you, maybe while you're up here, go ahead and highlight the smartphone app, if you would. Come on over to this side. I'm not sure if that mic is active.
Is it?
Yeah. You want to speak from there? You can?
Sure. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Brad Morgan from ROCOM, as I was introduced. To start off on the questions that were highlighted in the report here, the tower quantity question that came up, the sheriff has, what are we up to, 9 sites? 9 sites receive and transmit throughout the county here. The big difference between what the sheriff's trying to do and what a road commission does is that the sheriff's department needs communications with a 5-watt portable radio, usually worn on the belt of a deputy or officer, versus a mobile radio. In this case, it's going to be a 40-watt mobile radio with its antenna mounted on the roof of the truck. The difference being that you get a lot more coverage and strength out of a mobile radio. Right now, we're working with the sheriff to implement vehicular repeaters, which is kind of an oversimplification, but it's effectively allowing a portable radio to be amplified and run through the mobile radio, giving it the same coverage. When that's the case, those radios don't have very few, if any, coverage problems. So to summarize that point, that's how we can cover the entire county off 1 or 1.5 sites. The way we've got this designed is for Jackson, we would have a site at the county building here. Then there'd actually be a shared site in Albion, right on the county line with Calhoun, and then they would also have one over in Sonoma by Battle Creek for Calhoun purposes. The system is tied together. It's called a Link Capacity Plus system, where this can be adjusted and changed as we need to and as the project were developed. But kind of the idea we have now is that Calhoun would have its own channel, or talk group we call it, in this system. Jackson would have their own, and then they would have a shared one where if they wanted to work together, they have that option. If they need to switch over, if someone in Calhoun needs to switch over or borrow equipment, lend it to Jackson, they can switch that channel on the radio, and now they're completely interoperable with each other communications-wise. Moving ahead to the microwave link upgrade. Right now, our design calls for all 3 sites that I just mentioned need to be linked together through IP in one way or the other. We looked at doing a leased line, which we would estimate at about $400 a month to lease. As was stated, a big part of their goal was to avoid recurring cost. So the design opted for the microwave link. So what we have here is Calhoun has existing equipment which links Sonoma to Albion. Jackson has existing equipment that links the county building to Stony Point. But what the problem is with that link is that it's not as reliable as the sheriff would like it to be, or if this system were on it, what they would like it to be. There's problems with inclement weather where the link will go down, lose connectivity. Because basically you've got 2 microwave dishes pointed at each other over a distance of 16 miles. So if those start blowing around or start getting ice, rain in between the 2 dishes, that's when they start losing connectivity. What our upgrade would do would be to add dual polarity microwave dishes, and what that means is you actually propagate your RF over both vertical and horizontal axes. So you're actually sending 2 signals at the same time, alternating, in spans of microseconds. But now you've essentially got 2 radios doing that to increase your robustness. The other thing that is not noted on here but is worth mentioning is back here at the county building, we have satellite dishes to all those towers around the county up on that roof. The problem that you run into is you have a finite amount of frequencies. They're using 4.9 gigahertz spectrum to do that. When you have all those microwave dishes firing and receiving at the same time, you can cause interference amongst themselves. So what we started implementing when we did the county dispatch upgrade was a pretty inexpensive solution to that problem. It's called Hub Site Sync, where effectively it times all those dishes and those microwaves where they're all firing out at the same time and they're receiving back at the same time. The only problem is, in order to do that, you need to upgrade to the latest technology. It's a product called the 400 series link, whereas when all these links were established, it was the 200 series. So it's just a matter of the latest technology coming in. That again will help increase the robustness, not just of that link, but the entire system. microwave link for the sheriff, fire, lien, as well as the road commission. In particular, if you were to look at the map of all these links, the link to Stony Point and actually the link up to O'Leary are kind of 180 degrees to each other, that more or less, 170 we'll say. So those two in particular really kind of eat away at each other. With that part of this implemented, that's really going to help increase the robustness of both those links.
Before you move on, Brad,
Yeah.
I want to highlight the tower quantity question one more time, just to emphasize the use differences between what JDOT uses and the Sheriff's Department anticipates. It kind of made a good visual for me to hear the team describe that officers are sometimes on their hands and knees, they're in vehicles, they're in buildings, emergency situations. Our workers are primarily in their vehicles 95% of the time with 40-watt units with high transmission power and reception power. We have occasional use of the 4-watt handhelds, but not nearly as much as the officers will use. And with our iPhone, not our iPhone app, but our smartphone app, we can always supplement the handhelds using phones as well. So perhaps you'd like to highlight on that app? No, Brett?
Yeah. One of the, there's a few different software programs we put into this solution, not just the GPS, but this one in particular is called Radio Pro or TurboView. They actually just rebranded themselves to Radio Pro. But what this does is it gives you remote access through a gateway to the radio system. So as was discussed, as long as your smartphone or tablet or desktop computer has internet connectivity, you could be anywhere in the world and still get back to the system. Is it likely that somebody's going to be in China and need to dispatch the radio system? Probably not, but it very well may happen where somebody's on the road, out of town, and something comes up and they need to be able to get back. So what I have here on my phone is actually a demo unit we have back at our shop in Kalamazoo, where I don't know how well you guys can see this, but it's pretty basic. You've got your channel there. You can change the channel, your push-to-talk button, your volume. You can essentially do anything you could do from the face of the radio through your phone. If you want to just let it sit and monitor, it'll do that too, if that's what you need to do, and then jump in if and when you need to.
And that's a cost savings feature, just to tell you. The base units that we have in the office, sitting in offices, are expensive additions to a system. So we could literally just log it on the computer and have it in a monitoring state during storm events and so forth using our laptops or our desktop computers. So another nice supplement to the system. Lieutenant Hammond, would you please say a few words about our collaboration with you, and also our co-locations will be preserved?
Yes.
If you don't mind.
Thank you. We've been in contact and discussion with JDOT since the very first meeting, which was actually set in Calhoun County. I want to say probably 7-8 months ago.
December?
Yeah. So we've been filled in through the whole process, emails. I've attended most of the meetings with JDOT. And also the GIS department was also involved in a few of the meetings. This has no interference with our radio system for the law enforcement and fire departments as well.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Lieutenant Hammond?
Commissioners, questions of Lieutenant Hammond? Okay, none. Are you ready for general questions, Chris? Or?
I am. I have one last comment real quick, and that is that we have also, as Lieutenant Hammond mentioned, we have invited IT at the table through, it has been a long and arduous process. The committee, the joint committee with Calhoun, met many, many times and vetted out vendors. They drafted the RFQ, interviewed vendors, made a selection. Selection ultimately was Rocom. We interviewed all of them. I sat in on some of those. Our IT representative at JDOT, Sean Daly, was involved in many of those meetings, as well as GIS, because our plan is to take a lot of this GPS data and package it in a way that maps can be created of the storm events, our responses to things, our snowplow routes, and so forth. So it's very important that we have software that can talk to our GIS folks and that integrates, plugs and plays well with our IT system. So I can also tell you that Calhoun County basically took the lead because the chair of that committee is Brad Wilcox, the assistant administrator in Calhoun. And so he had his IT people vet this out extensively before it got too far. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Chris, I'll preface my comments with saying I support moving you forward with technology, but I do have a number of questions and issues, and I've actually toyed with that app before for smartphones. But Brad, it's accurate that that app would work on virtually any radio system or band, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. One of my largest issues is the fact that we're going from VHF to UHF. And Chris, I think one of the comments you made is that right now Calhoun County can't talk with Jackson County. Do I assume that's because they're on UHF and we're on VHF right now?
I'll defer to Brad on that. What do you know about that?
That's correct, yep. And the frequency matter came up early on in discussion.
The band, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
The primary reason why we suggested UHF is channel availability and licensing. In order to do a GPS or data system, it doesn't even have to be GPS, just general data, by FCC law, you are supposed to have what's called a exclusive use channel, or FB8 as it's licensed, versus a general shared channel as FB2 when you look at the FCC license. And what that means is that they have cleared an FB8 channel for your exclusive use within that area. The reason that's important is because when these radios, or any radios for that matter, send data, they don't monitor to see if anyone else is on the channel. They get that data, they shoot it out, and that's that. If somebody else is on that frequency, it's going to walk all over them, cause interference problems. The reason why UHF was necessary to go to and build this system on is because those channels are available. Just bluntly, they are not available in VHF. The sheriff and I have been working for, and Jason can attest to this, several months. We're trying to get clean VHF channels to adjust that system to alleviate some of the interference problems on that system. And it's taken quite a while. I think we started this, well, if you really go back, it's been over a year. We're currently going back and forth with Canada over the one last frequency, and that's been at least 6 months. And those are all FB2s. We told the Road Commission, both Calhoun and Jackson early on, if they wanted to stay with VHF, we respect their decision, but we would want to bow out because there's just no way they would get those channels in VHF.
Okay, as I researched it, I took some of the information we were provided, including the models of the radios that we currently have, and those, of course, are VHF, but it appears to me that they're GPS capable as well. Would probably encounter some of the problems that you're talking about, but I do know through the undersheriff and Lieutenant Hammond that they had some of the same issues as you noted about getting clean channels and had to in fact switch to get exclusive channels for us for law enforcement and fire. So I don't necessarily know that's insurmountable or not, or if it would be any more important than the law enforcement functions served by it.
Excuse me.
Operationally,
David?
we switched in this county from the city police, City of Jackson, having a UHF band to going to VHF. My experience is nowhere near as detailed as any of yours, but UHF is typically used in urban areas because of the way it works in buildings, and VHF if I understand it right, works better in rural open areas because of the way the signal transmits. And although you're talking about only, I think, 10 portable radios, what you have in the bid is going to be mainly on mobile radios. There are still times in this county when patrol cars are having a problem transmitting in the cars. I hear it. I know the sheriff's working on correcting that, but it does happen in the northwest corner and also on the east side of the county. When I looked at your maps in here, I think that coverage map says a lot, if that's how I'm reading it. It shows you the areas that the radio system will cover and won't. Operationally, although you've got a smartphone app, and I think you talk about some other technology in here, crossover that dispatch would have to be able to flip a switch. We had that years ago in Jackson County, and it would tie up the radio and was not conducive to good communications, just in my opinion. And there's no way for patrol cars with this system you're talking about communicating with road commission trucks easily. And typically what happens in the law enforcement or fire setting is when two units get into the same area, they switch to an off channel that doesn't go through a repeater, and they can talk from car to car. Having a UHF in road commission and VHF in patrol cars alleviates the ability to do that. I think that's a loss, especially if there's a critical incident. In the spec sheet that you gave us for these radios, although it's in the presentation that these are capable of narrowbanding down to 6 1/4 again, that's not what it says on the spec sheets for it. It's got it, channel spacing is 12.5 kilohertz and 25 kilohertz. So I'm not sure if that's right or if what you have in the presentation is right if narrowbanding happens again. So my biggest concerns are the ability to talk across the channels between different emergency units. Can't happen or can't happen easily. The coverage is worrisome to me, although dispatch apparently will have access to talking with road commission and anybody with a smart app. That's not the same. I'm curious about the number of radios themselves. Do we have 256 vehicles or pieces of equipment that would have radios in them? Or am I reading the...
That's for both counties, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I didn't understand that this proposal was for both counties, so we've got...
Well, Calhoun approved their pieces of it. Our share is the 200 and some odd thousand, and the number of radios we have is around 140 to 160, somewhere in there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this, well, the next thing then is this trade-in credit. Are these, you've got trade-in value $75 a piece for 256 Motorola Moto Turbo 5000 series radios. That's all the radios in both counties?
Correct.
For trade-in?
Yes.
Except all of them. Mm-hmm.
And that's a fair trade-in value, we think?
Yes, yes it is. That's being offered directly from Motorola.
What does a used VHF radio of that series sell for, if you know?
The CM200 models that the Road Commission currently has are probably comparable to that, within $75 to $100 each. They're 4-channel units, which don't really yield a high market value because of the limited channels.
Okay, I took it to be that there were 250, the way it's written is there's 256 Motorola Turbo 5000 series trade-in credits. So those are different radios that are being traded in.
Correct. The current model is the CM200.
Okay, that wasn't clear here.
The new model is the XPR 5000, 5550 to be exact.
It's a special rebate program through Motorola, basically.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And that is ending, by the way. If we don't act, we do lose that, this is my understanding.
Okay, and then my last question is, I'm assuming that the prices quoted here take into account my deal or state purchase prices if they apply? Or do they not?
I don't believe we have that option to pick a system that's custom designed and tailored through my deal. The team did turn over every option.
I didn't look at it, but there's typically a percentage discount through my deal that's automatic, and I'll look at it afterwards. Okay, well, again, just for me, I support moving the technology forward. I don't necessarily support this UHF option because I think that many of the things, if not all the things that you've talked about improving, are available on the VHF side. I understand what you're saying about the frequency availability. But the microwave tower updates and links and all that could be done if this were a VHF proposal you were doing or UHF, correct?
That's correct. However, it's really a moot point to discuss doing this on VHF because it's not possible. The channels are not there to do this legally. We could put this up illegally, but then you're going to get shut down.
I'm not suggesting you do that.
So, but that's what I'm saying, is that it's just not an option to do this on VHF. If we could, I have no objection to doing that. It's just not an option available.
Why does Motorola sell the radios in VHF that are GPS capable?
For other purposes. They still operate in analog. They still operate in digital voice. It's easier to create a radio that has that option in it than to create a whole different line for just a different band.
Okay. I've hogged up all the time, but if there are any other questions, Julie? Chairman Chatwa.
I would like, and I realize, Chris, you're just coming on board and everything like that, but as the chairman of the board, I'm very disappointed that we are being held what I would consider to be, I'm not going to say hostage, because of this buyback program that you've been involved in now for over 6 months. I wish the commission would have been aware that this was online and coming forward. I'm not a fan of an agency or department coming and saying we need to make a decision, because in the past we've been forced into decisions because of short-term savings and end up with long-term consequences. And I can think to a sewer project right now what's going on that way. I think that we need to be a little bit more accommodative of this board in sharing information on a go-forward basis if we're going to be doing something that is this strategic in our county. I would please hope that your office would keep that in mind on projects coming forward.
Thank you. I am very sensitive to that, to be honest with you. One of the things that I had assumed and even been told in my first few days was that GPS was a long-term goal that had been sitting. And so I took the bull by the horns and got this rolling. This is one of the options we explored. We've looked at other options that are cell phone based and so forth. Having researched this before, again, I stand before you with a high recommendation that this is the right choice for us at this point in time. I do want to address some of Commissioner Elwell's concerns too, and I might need your help, Brad. 4 points I noted here. You mentioned, Commissioner Elwell, that our current radios are GPS capable. Did you just mean to say that the VHF frequencies would handle it? But the radios themselves, my understanding is they're definitely not GPS capable.
Chris, my saying that was based on the information provided in the 23-page document that had the model being traded in. Looking up that model. If that's not the actual model that you've got, then that's not accurate. But that's how it's printed in the document.
Okay,
So,
and that was
so
the
that may not be
response.
accurate, but it's based on what was in your document.
Do you recall, Brad, how that was phrased and worded?
The trade-in applies to purchases of those XPR 5000 models, radios. So the CM200 model radios that they currently have are not capable of GPS whatsoever.
I believe that 100%, but it'd be helpful to us to know what we're actually trading in, because that's what it looks like to me. Maybe I've misinterpreted it, but that's how it reads. So.
Sure, sure. And I can assure you, again, based on Commissioner Shotwell's comment, that we are not moving forward just because of the rebate or the trade-in issue at all. It's just an added piece of it that Motorola does from time to time, correct, Brad? And we just happen to fall in one of those windows. I was able to take advantage of one a couple of years ago, and then in one case, not able to take advantage of one. So we just happen to be in one of those windows. It's just an added benefit or bonus that I think saves about $10,000, if I recall. The dispatch issue, we will have seamless communications with dispatch, is my understanding, through a patch. Do you want to explain that, Brad?
Yep. As it sits right now, there's a resource on the dispatch system that is for the current road commission channel. The way we have this planned out and designed initially is that they will have on these radios another talk group. Again, adding talk groups to the system is unlimited, just like adding or not just like, but very similar to just adding a phone on a cellular network. You don't need a whole new repeater or anything. You don't have dedicated channels to this. The repeaters are actually steering traffic based on which slots are open to them. So the point being is that you could add dozens, hundreds of channels without having to add any more licensing or infrastructure. The only limit is the capacity of voice. If everybody starts talking, that's when you need to add more infrastructure on the back end. But my point being is that our initial design plan is that the radios will have a channel called Sheriff Interop, or whatever we want to call it, for the purpose of communicating with the sheriff or whichever channel they want to patch that into. The reason we would want a separate channel and not just their main one is because it'd be more of a special application, if you will. The sheriff doesn't want to hear all of the chatter that would go on a road commission, and vice versa. The road commission doesn't need to hear all the traffic that's going on that sheriff channel. But by switching that over to a specific channel, if there is a situation where road commission needs to work with law enforcement, now they have that capability, and they're not patching over every single person on both of those systems together.
Good, thank you. One of the other questions came up was peer-to-peer communications. I know this system will allow our crew members and management to talk peer-to-peer if we're out of the range of our towers for some reason. Will we have peer-to-peer capabilities with the Sheriff's Department and other emergencies, or is it merely through the patch?
It's through the patch only. Peer-to-peer will not be available from VHF, sheriff, fire, police, etc., to road commission UHF.
And based on our coverage maps, Brad, do you want to address that issue? Handhelds have limitations. We've discussed that, but how about the vehicle-based coverage maps?
I'm sorry, what is it you'd like me to
Well, one of the stipulations we had in our qualifications was that we had robust coverage for both counties within acceptable criteria, and that's been vetted. Do you want to comment on the coverage?
Yep. I guess I'll let the maps speak for themselves as far as the coverage area. We create those maps very conservatively, and to expand on that, when we do those, we don't ever want somebody to come back to us and say, "Oh, your map said I'm going to have coverage here," and we don't. We would rather say, "You're not going to have coverage here," and have somebody come back and say, "Oh, this is great. Your map is actually less than I was expecting." So I guess a picture's worth 1,000 words. I'll let that speak for itself. What we had talked about in the meetings with the Road Commission was setting up a preliminary system to test this out and see what coverage is actually going to be. We do have frequencies available to us where we could do that, actually off of the county building here. Put an antenna up. We have demo repeaters for that purpose, and we have demo radios. We could put a repeater in place temporarily, give the Road Commission or whatever parties are involved a few radios to run around with, and they can test it out and verify for themselves. They can drive to every far-flung corner of the county and see how well it works.
Good, thank you. And the future narrowbanding, these new radios are definitely...
Yep, these are, they're called 6 1/4 equivalent, which is type accepted by the FCC. These attain that through what's called TDMA, or Time Division Multiple Access, where I had referenced slots earlier. A repeater actually has what's called 2 time slots. What they do is actually take a 12.5 kilohertz or narrowband channel or frequency and divide that into 2 alternating time slots, microseconds apart, alternating indefinitely. In doing that, you achieve 2 completely separate channels for voice or data, and they call that 6 1/4 equivalent. You'll see it notated as 6.25 in the lowercase e, and again, that is type accepted by the FCC. Just a brief technical note, there is also 6 1/4 FDMA, frequency division, multiple access, 6 1/4 frequencies. Those are just notated as 6.25. You lose a lot of range with those. Those systems are not very popular. They are out there, but this has really kind of become the de facto standard for commercial, professional grade 6 1/4 equivalent systems.
Thank you, Brad. In closing, I would just like to share a couple of more points. Number one, in response to questions, Chairman Shotwell, I do apologize for the confusion on this. I am responsible for that, and that was my oversight in not alerting you perhaps through my updates in prior. We are fixing that and addressing that through monthly updates now. Here, even later on today's agenda, this is absolutely something that I would mention, and in fact, radios are on that agenda. I've also put on another big item that's coming up, and that's our equipment and the needs to look at options there. So again, I think this is just a victim perhaps of me getting up to speed and getting on board in both agencies, both organizations. And I had assumed all along from day one that GPS was a major initiative for both counties. I was tired, frankly, and shocked as I reviewed finances in Calhoun to see us throwing away $30,000, in my words, throwing away, on a cell phone-based system where we could not read information and data. It was not useful like this will be. So a very different system. We definitely saw the weaknesses of what we didn't want to have, and so this new system has been designed to fix that. To put this in perspective, we have millions of dollars in rolling assets and equipment, and radios are an essential, vital piece of our operations. This is a lot of money. We take this very seriously, and again, we spent a lot of time and energy. It's not like we just got a phone call and got a price quote and here we are. This has been months in the making, and the Calhoun board did unanimously approve it without question. So I think, again, apologize that I had assumed that this would be simple based on what I'd experienced there. So that was not fair of me, and I apologize. And lastly, the radios are a reimbursable item on our MDOT equipment, and whenever we rent out the equipment, rent to Calhoun, etc. Just one of those, when we rent a truck, the blades, every little thing, the wing plow, the radio, it's all there as a reimbursable item. So all 14 of our state trucks, those trucks plus our supervisors' pickups, we're going to receive a revenue in perpetuity for the radios. And GPS is also a line item that you can add as well. So currently we don't add that line item. So slowly over time we will recoup some of these costs, some of this investment. And MDOT expects us to and encourages us to think outside the box and implement these things. So if they're one of our customers and we could lose that contract if we're not responsive. Another example is a request that came up in our winter review where they asked for double wing plows to try. So on some of our new trucks, we kind of went out on a limb and we're going to install those double wings rather than just one-sided. So a GPS system is also one of those things that they would like to see us being more state-of-the-art and cutting edge. So we're just trying to be responsive in that light as well. Thank you.
Okay, if we're going to send this to the full board, we'll need a motion. Judy or Julie, do you have a question?
Sure. Christopher, would you please just address the $261,000 that's being requested? The documentation here says is coming from the capital equipment budget. Would you explain the difference between that and simply the line item in the budget that repairs roads?
Sure. We, based on Act 51 standards, and the way that our Act 51 report, which we reviewed a week ago, requires us to report, if we do not invest in our equipment and keep an ongoing, make those ongoing investments, there are quasi-penalties in the way that our accounting numbers look. So it is a separate piece, and quite literally the capital replacement budget for us should be close to $2 or $3 million a year, ideally. We're not there. We're about $1 million-ish per year right now. We're well under, so we're falling behind, and that's something that we'll cover more as we talk about trucks in a future presentation. But this is not tied to roads. It is a reimbursable item, as I mentioned, a necessary cost of operations. To put it, maybe an analogy would be, we could say, let's not buy computers. Let's just use the typewriters. They're cheap. We already own them. They're in the basement. But we would clearly lose a lot of time and energy and money and efficiency if we pulled out the typewriters and used those instead.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Nope. I will make the motion to move it to the full board.
Motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Aye. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Chris, you're back up again with the county road salt bid.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Okay. Good luck. Thank you.
Drive the speed limit, Brad.
I'm sorry?
Drive the speed limit.
All right, so we're up for trying to get it right. Is salt bid first? Yes. Okay.
Correct.
Each year, salt bids are taken, of course, and we're fortunate this year with a bid price at $56.22 per ton. That is higher than in years past. I did some research with our team. 2012, we had $45.60 per ton, and $45.98 in 2013, $56.18 in 2014, and $56.22 is our current bid. But to give you some perspective, the state's My Deal price came in at $80.28. So our regional effort in partnering with Calhoun County has resulted in a very enviable salt price. We are early in the process, and we're very, very comfortable with this price, and we'd like to ask permission to move forward.
Are you looking for a motion to send this on to the full board?
We are, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Motion. It's to sit. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Thanks, Chris. Cold patch bid.
Same thing. Again, we're very happy that basically we had an option to extend an existing bid, $82 per ton. We use about between 1,500 and 1,800 tons per year patching. This is basically for those times a year when we cannot get better materials or that we need an emergency fix. So again, we're asking to move this to the full board for approval.
Motion and support. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Thanks, Chris. Now your monthly update.
Sure. Do you all have the monthly update that you can pull up? Okay, very good. Just highlight a few of those items. Storm damage assessment. We have attached a current list, and Bob, if you want to come stand with me, that'd be great. You can answer any questions. He is now able to stand without assistance. Great. Do you want to comment on the storm event, Bob? We have the listing that's been provided. Thank you for updating that so I could share that with them. Did you want to, basically all issues have been handled at this point?
Yes, basically all the issues have been handled other than a few of the roads that are closed, that were closed even prior to the event. But all the trees have been removed from the road, all the damaged washouts have been repaired. We do still have crews out. The roads were cleared with the trees, but there's still some of those trees are in the right of way that over time, when we get time, we're going back out to clean up some of that stuff. But that's really all that's left over from the storm.
When you see our list, the status is really the status of the service request. It's not the status of the road. So when it says closed, it just means we've closed out the issue and taken care of it, if that makes sense.
And then the column next to it that says road closed, that was at the time when the call came in, is whether it was partially closed, 1 lane, 2 lanes, and that was just to tell us at that time what the condition of the road was.
In the future, my goal and initiative, and something I'll be working with the GIS department on, is to give you a map. The list is great, but if you could see visually where the damage occurred, that's much more helpful for all of you and also for the public. So we would post that to the website. We used Calhoun Resources to pilot a map for this last storm event, and it proved successful, and they have one up and running. So I'll be doing that here in Jackson as well. We did send all that information on to the National Weather Service so they could make help us make the determination on the amount and the extensive damage and so forth. It did not reach the threshold, though, for federal disaster recovery dollars, though. But it was a significant event for us nonetheless. It took a lot of time and energy away, and it did delay some of our projects. Equipment capital planning is something that, yes, go ahead, Chairman Shotwell. Early on we did. I think that's all been resolved now. There was a slight delay. That was a contractor issue, not, as far as I understand, not related to our efforts in the design of the project at all. So heavy rains have also caused the river level to be high, of course, but I don't think that's holding up construction any longer. So, sure, that's item number 11 on the report. Yep. Good question. Equipment capital planning. We have been working very hard, again, over months, and we're ready to begin showing you some of our thoughts early on, and I think I've heard comments that you've read perhaps my weekly updates to Administrator Overton on this. Long story short is we're bleeding by death by 1,000 cuts, if that makes sense, when we assess our maintenance costs. And Bob can attest to the fact, and I've been alarmed over this past winter, we've had times when 8, 9, 10 trucks were down at any one given time, right in the heat of when we need them. And I can't imagine running an EMS operation or a fire station and not being able to start the fire trucks, or they break down on the way. So in many regards, the fleet that we keep and maintain needs to be viewed as an emergency response fleet. And the state encourages, with our MDOT contract, this is one shining example of why it's beneficial for us to have this contract with MDOT. They want the best and brightest equipment out on their roads. They're the busiest roads in the county, and so they want to make sure that things operate. And if you look around at MDOT equipment, it's not all that old. So as a strategy, the state has adopted much like other states, to have a rule of thumb of, a maximum age of 5 to 10 years on their equipment. We have equipment that's well over that, 20-ish plus, and it's pretty serious. So we met with our team here a couple of weeks ago and revealed a plan to aggressively, over a 10-year cycle, take advantage of today's low interest rates on lease-to-purchase programs. This is commonly being done now. Now, if interest rates rise, we would, of course, amend that plan. But equipment prices and demand are climbing rapidly and have been for the last 5 to 10 years. We're seeing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% inflation on equipment. It just depends what type of equipment and how it's equipped. We don't have trucks that are ready and on the lot. These are custom-built machines. You buy the chassis, and then you add all the stuff, and you have to get it built. It used to be you could get a truck in 6 months, maybe. Those days are gone. Everybody's ordering equipment. They've deferred so long. So now it's 18 months plus. You get the chassis, and then the chassis will sit, and you wait for the build to occur. So it's important for us to plan ahead. So I'll have more information coming in the near future, but we have a detailed strategic plan that will help us save on our operational costs and take advantage of MDOT's ability to reimburse us. Item number 3, the radio modernization we've covered. These are both mainly just high-level updates on that. The chip seal program, there was an attachment with a table, and again, I would like to prepare maps in the future so you'll have visual images, and our team has some handwritten maps that are highlighted, but we'll try to get those more professional for you in the future using GIS resources. Bob, do you want to highlight the program? Anything you want to share about it? It is beginning tomorrow. We were hoping to start today, but the weather caused us to hold off. This is an example of sharing with Calhoun, by the way. We're using their chip spreader and so forth. So did you want to say anything about the program in general?
Really, you've got most of it here already. We are planning to start tomorrow, but again, Mother Nature may call us off again. But basically, like he's got on the the update here, we're going to start on Hanover Road, get Hanover Road done, then Sears Road, Horton Road, Kibbe Road, Reynolds Road, and then we'll move on to the Sandstone Township 70-30 match. They've got about 13 and a half or so miles that they've pitched in. They're 70% to have those repaired also. Really going to be a weather issue as to how long it takes us. Everything goes perfect. It'll take us 9 work days to complete all this, but it'll pretty much take a month's worth of time to get those 9 good work days in there. And so we're hoping to have it done by the end of July or first week of August, but we're just waiting for Mother Nature there.
Thank you, Bob. You can see from the table that we have about 45 miles of roads that we're doing. A lot of that is grant covered. You'll see match grant dollar amounts and the JDOT costs. We have to provide about $267,000. We get about $1 million in recovery through Rural Task Force dollars and other grant programs. I just want to highlight something that I mentioned earlier. With things like the radio purchase and any other attachments that we put on our trucks and equipment, every hour that that truck is out on the grade, things like the radio are charged back to that project and that grant and so forth. So the investments we make are recouped and then depreciated over time on our books. So no secret that we spend a lot of money. You know, this helps to put it in perspective as well. We'd love to chip seal more roads than this, but this is really all we can bear. And again, investments we make in equipment are recouped. So I think the rest of the report is self-explanatory.
Yes, Julie has a question for you.
Yes, go ahead.
Could you please address how those roads were chosen? What the selection process there of those roads?
Sure. Bob, would you like to? Our team gets together. They have a road committee that reviews.
We have a committee that is made up of, like myself and all the area foremen, the superintendent for the areas.
Before Bob goes any further, it didn't used to be this way. So this is something new we've started. There was a committee informally, but now it's more formal.
Yeah, pretty much before it was, I guess...
Engineering?
Well, some of engineering. They mainly take care of the federal aid stuff. But it was really a couple people would sit down and say, let's do these roads this year, you know. Mm-hmm. No, I didn't see any rhyme or reason to it. So now we have a full committee of the area foremen, the superintendents. We've talked to a few of the township supervisors, but basically we started a year or two ago where we're kind of trying to work from like one area so that the cost effectiveness of the contractors and everything are easier. But we started out in the southwest corner, and really that was just, everybody just agreed we'll start there, you know. And then we're trying to work around the county, both directions, a little bit at a time each year to address the roads in that area. It just happens that corner of the county, like it'd be the northeast corner of the county, the roads are in better shape. Over the years, they've been either taken care of better or for whatever reason, they're in better shape. It's the other part of the county that really needs the roads the most.
So I guess I'm listening and I'm not hearing you saying anything about the PACER ratings or any, I'm hearing you say better, but I'm not.
Are considered, if they're too far gone, there's a couple roads that a chip seal is not going to fix. If the PACER ratings are such or the conditions of the roads are such that a little bit of wedge and chip seal will fix those roads and keep them, you know, operational for another 5, 7, 10 years, great. But there's a few roads, Erie, Gibbs, King,
Oaks.
There's a few roads that are going to take a lot more
Yes.
work than what a chip seal will fix. We could take the whole chip seal budget and put it on one of those roads and you still wouldn't fix that road. So it's spread out to allow us to use our budget as what we can, use as many roads, miles as we can. But the thought process behind it is we're trying to
Move around the county.
Around the county to where if we need somebody to wedge those roads before we chip seal it, we get a lot better price if they're all in that area or in 2 areas. If we kind of hopscotched around like they have done in the past, the price goes through the roof for their mobilization. So really that's...
And my understanding is the difference between whether you decide to do the wedging or the DuraPatch, but then that is a determining factor on what project is done within a year or later than a year.
Yeah, it's really the condition of the road. Sometimes the dirt patcher will heal it enough to where when we chip seal it, it'll do good. Some areas are like little blown out areas that just need a wedge, and then that allows us to chip seal over the top of it. But
Okay.
In the future, Commissioner Alexander, we plan to do an extensive capital plan, one just for primary roads for all of you to look at and review, and then township by township. I've mentioned this before at a township supervisors meeting. We're in the process, we just completed PACER ratings of all local roads. That's not a mandatory thing, but it's something that we voluntarily do. So those numbers are fresh and new and usable to create maps, exhibits for each township. So they will help us select the local roads as part of our match program, the 70-30 match program. So any local roads you see in these plans are basically at the selection of the townships. Primary roads are this committee looking at taking care of those. Some counties defer chip sealing and do it every other year. That's sometimes commonly done. We choose to go regionally, basically, and so again, those maps will help us to see that visually. But I can assure you the capital planning is coming forward, and I have information I'll be presenting in August on that and how that can work for us to our advantage. The last item, go ahead, Bob.
that whole program, just so you know, is just on primary roads. It has nothing to do with local roads. It's just our primary roads that we're responsible for. And then, like, they've already wedged or starting to wedge next year's chip seals, because we need to wedge them a year prior and do the crack sealing and stuff a couple years prior. So it's kind of a process where, you know, the road got crack sealed last year, got wedged this year, get chip sealed next year, and that's how we're kind of working that. So the ones for next year are already being wedged.
Good, thank you. The last item was number 5 that I just want to quickly highlight, and that's the Folks Road tragedy that occurred recently. We are in the process of conducting a study of the need for a guardrail in that area. There are basically 3 locations. We've hired an independent consultant to take a look at that so that we get an objective opinion. One of the challenges is if it is recommended, and we believe it will be, is how to pay for it. Because technically it's one of those local road projects that would require a 70% township match, technically. There are grant programs available at an 80-20 split, but the way they score those grants is based on history of accidents. So it could be tough to qualify for, but that'll be part of our study as well. If we got a grant, the guardrail couldn't go in for probably 2 years. It's usually a 2-year ahead application for obligation of those federal funds to occur. So I just want to give you assurances that we take this seriously and that we're looking into that issue. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, moving on to other business. We have the claims to pay. Looking for a motion? We have a motion. Do we have a support from the right end of the table?
Yes.
Motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Claims are paid. Other minutes, the August reporting schedule is printed. Back to public comments. No public comments. Okay. Committee member comments. I think we've talked enough. We're adjourned.